Welcome everyone, my name is Sebastian Linzner and I will talk about the role of privacy in digitalization, analyzing perspectives of German farmers. When an industry is undergoing the process of digital transformation, data becomes more and more important and itself becomes a resource. This raises the need for privacy, since the exchange of data is a key part of every collaboration and data has to be passed down the supply chain. Furthermore, digitalized machines require process data to function correctly, and even the data that is documented during the work processes becomes a primary product itself. That agriculture is an interesting field of research from the perspective of privacy has several reasons. First of all, there's a very heterogeneous adoption. There are farms that have a highly digitalized infrastructure like smart machines, digital administration tools, some even own their own server architecture. On the other hand, there are some farms that have barely any digital tools. They do the manual labor on the farm, and even their documentation is handwritten. And of course, there's everything in between in that range. The second reason is a heterogeneous opinion about digitalization. Some have a very positive opinion because they perceive benefits for the work routine or even a positive climate impact. Others see the whole thing very negative. They see themselves as merely office workers. They fear that they lose the social connections, and they will not adopt unless they are forced by law, which is the case already for some cases like dairy farms or pig breeding, which I will explain later on. The third reason is a significant imbalance of power. In Germany, most farmers are small and medium enterprises or even family businesses, and they are facing huge up and downstream players like traders, which often have market monopoly in their region, chemical companies which supply them with fertilizers or seed, machine manufacturers, and state authorities. While all of those have legitimate interest in obtaining data from the farmers, too much transparency could further weaken the position of the farmers. This is even worse because the drivers behind technical innovation are not the farmers themselves, but the bigger actors in the supply chain. This leads to our research gap. In agriculture, the process of digital transformation is still ongoing, which allows us to investigate which mechanisms drive the adoption of digital tools. The perspective of farmers is underrepresented because the drivers behind technical innovations are usually the big players. The third aspect is that data sharing is highly important in this domain because, as said earlier, most farms are small and medium enterprises and they cannot afford buying every machine. So they are heavily relying on collaboration and distribution of work, which also requires data transfer. The existing researchers focus on large-scale farms, while the majority of SME or family-driven farms is not considered. Furthermore, we investigate the hypothesis how privacy concerns affect the adoption of new technologies. This leads to our research question: how does privacy affect the adoption of digital technology in agriculture? To address our research question, we conducted an empirical study with 12 focus groups and a total of 52 participants. The participants were volunteers and were not compensated. Each participant was informed about the purpose of the study and signed in an informed consent form. The data was obtained via audio recording. Further details on the study can be found in the method chapter of the paper. In this talk, I will not be able to cover all of our results. Instead, I will focus on some of our privacy-related findings. First of all, the dependency on digitalization is affected by the agricultural subdomain. Which benefits do tools provide, other legal requirements for the subdomain, and how much does a daily routine rely on machinery. I will explain this with the figure on the right. First, there are cattle farms. These are highly reliant on machinery. For example, dairy farms need to milk their cows daily, otherwise they will poison themselves. And since it would take half an hour to milk a single cow, cattle farms like dairy farms are reliant on milking robots. Another example is pig breeding. In order to avoid suffocation due to the evaporation of the animals, they need smart ventilation systems. They are even forced by law to operate emergency generators so that even in the case of a power outage, the animals will not suffer. On the other hand, there is an abundance of benefits for cattle farms regarding digitalized tools. For example, smart sensors for ventilation systems or feeding robots which recognize each animal and combine the optimal amount of nutrients to boost the performance of each animal. Since there are so many benefits and cattle farms are so reliant on digitalization, there is a high likelihood that they will adopt new digital tools. On the other hand, there are wine-producing farms. For viticulture, there are few machines and they are most not affordable. So the labor on the farm is still done by hand. And the only digitalization aspect would be digitalization the office work. So the farmers have the choice whether they adapt or not. So since there are sparse benefits and they do not really need to digitalize, the chance or the likelihood that wine producing farms will adopt digitalization is very low. The third example is grain producing. For grain farmers, there also exist benefits, but like the wine producing farmers, they do not need necessarily to adopt. They can still run their farms without any digitalization, but if they do, there are some benefits like automated driving on the fields or the optimal application of agents, for example. These are three examples that are arranged in our graphics, and based on this, other domains like vegetable growing, for example, can be categorized. As seen, there we can estimate the dependency. That the dependency is a driving factor for the adoption of new technology, but may also affect the privacy preferences, while those who are free to choose may have their own preferences and which are very strong. Those who are forced to adopt may have lower threshold to adopt digital technology. The second aspect is transparency and its consequences. Farmers usually do not like transparency because there are some severe consequences like personalized prices. If someone has insight into the business data of the farmers, they can get enormous advantage in terms of market position. And some of the participants already stated their experiences with personalized prices, as a quote on the right shows. When they use digital tools to manage their data, they do not know where that data may end up. And when then there is some letter with offers, they usually can imagine where that comes from. And if multiple actors along the supply chain get insight into the farmer's business data, this could pose a great risk. Another negative consequence of transparency is becoming obsolete. There are companies that buy up land of small farms and cultivate it themselves with unqualified and cheaper personnel. And this is really frightening for the small and medium enterprises and the family-driven farms, because it's an existential risk. They now know how to cultivate their land, what is special about their land, what has to be considered, and if all that data is just collected, anyone can copy that. On the right, we have again some quotes which show that this is really a threat that is considered by the farmers, and this is the reason why they don't like transparency. There is another reason why farmers are skeptical towards transparency. Farmers usually rely on funding from authorities like the government or the European Union. And these subsidies are usually linked to requirements like the maximum amount of fertilizer which is applied on the fields, regulations on which plant protection agent may be used or may not be used, and even regulations regarding the protection of water bodies. And farmers fear that sensors in the digitalized equipment could cause problems for the funding. For example, they can plan in the digitalized tools the optimum application of fertilizer or plant protection agents, but it depends on the machine that brings out the fertilizer or the plant protection agents, how much is applied on the field. And this could differ due to mechanical reasons. And farmers fear that those errors could bring them into big trouble, or typos in the reporting are a serious threat for them. Of course, transparency isn't always bad. It actually plays an important role in the food industry. Food scandals could be fought more efficiently if contaminated products can be traced easily. Machine manufacturers could use telemetric data to improve their machines and provide better maintenance for their farmers. The retailers are interested in transparency because they could prove quality criteria like organic and attract their customers more easily. The authorities have a strong interest in checking the compliance with the legal requirements. As stated on the previous slide, there are regulations regarding fertilizer and plant protection agents. These are quite important because intense application on a single plot of land could poison the drinking water. So in order to protect the citizens, the government has to restrict the use of fertilizer and plant protection agents. On the other hand, there are the concerns of the farmers, which I mentioned on the previous slide. The price dumping, the fear of becoming obsolete, the lacking trust in the correctness of the automated documentation, and the loss of funds. And furthermore, they have a strong fear that unauthorized access to the business data could cause them problems. And there is also a further problem for the farmers. They have to provide information to adhere to the quality criteria and legal requirements for the retailers, but they do not want to give insight into business data for suppliers and companies, which could put them onto an economic disadvantage due to personalized prices. But if they are revealing that data to the retailers, there is an unintended data leakage to the suppliers. To conclude, we investigated the role of privacy as a driving factor for technology adoption in agriculture, and we found a subdomain-specific dependency on technology that can influence the attitude towards privacy. Because those who are free to choose can live up to their own privacy preferences, while those who are dependent on the adoption may have a lower inhibitory threshold to adopt new digitized equipment and tools, because they may have the feeling they are forced to and they have no choice anyway. Furthermore, we found that the privacy preferences could build strong barriers for adoption because concerned farmers will never adopt unless they are forced by law. And this might be an explanation why there are so extremes regarding adoption. There are those who do everything manually on the farm, and even their office work is all handwritten, while others have their own server architecture and protect the data on their own farm without revealing anything to cloud services or something like that. But this requires a lot of knowledge about security and IT, and not everyone has the opportunity to do so. Especially the small and medium enterprises have a very tight time schedule and cannot afford to educate them in cybersecurity, for example. So they are reliant that researchers like us provide them with usable, secure, and privacy-preserving tools. This is especially important because the effects of missing privacy in agriculture are very severe and can pose existential risks for farmers. And this is not a problem of data protection against unauthorized data access. It's more a whole privacy topic with regard to data sovereignty, because farmers have to share their data in order to collaborate, to adhere to the legal requirements or the contracts from the retailers. And this data is made public, but the farmers have no measure to defend themselves against unauthorized or unwanted data access. This leads to the outlook on future research. First, we have ethical considerations. Pharma have a very weak market position compared to the big players in the supply chain, like the chemical companies, machine manufacturers, the retailers. And further weakening this position could have serious effects on the whole domain, because if the weakest link in the supply chain fails, it could have serious ripple effects on the whole industry. The second aspect is that transparency is forced by the industry. For example, the blockchain technology is heavily favored by the retailers in order to fulfill the quality criteria they promise their customers, to trace products from farm to table, which is a good narrative for them and their sales, but puts a great pressure on farmers, which do not necessarily want to make all their data public, where also the others in the supply chain have a look into it and maybe put pressure on the farmers with personalized prices. So it might be a good idea to have a look at secure multi-party computation in this area, because something like zero-knowledge proofs could be very useful to prove quality criteria without revealing the actual business data of the farmers. So the customers could still rely on the quality they are promised, but the farmers have a tool to defend themselves. The third aspect is about authentication and legal considerations, because there's a strong need for effective mechanisms to ensure that data is only used for a specific purpose and that is not misused by others in the supply chain to put pressure on the farmers to do personalized prices to buy them out. So protecting data and the purpose for the data's use is very important. And this requires legal considerations and smart mechanisms to ensure that data is only used for a specific purpose. For example, in the project I'm working in HiSurf, we aim to document the use cases, how the data may be used, and if then misuse happens, we could use this evidence to fight back. With this, I will conclude my talk. Thank you all for your attention, and if you have any questions or remarks, please feel free to contact me.